The mountain wind did not merely blow. It screamed like a living thing, clawing at the stone walls of the estate and dragging needles of ice through the air. Snow compacted beneath hurried boots with a brittle crunch, each step labored, breath tearing in and out in ragged clouds that vanished almost as soon as they appeared. The world outside was reduced to white chaos and sound, wind, snow, and the frantic rhythm of someone fighting the cold. Before the towering wooden door, scarred by decades of storms, desperate knocking echoed again and again. The door loomed like a barrier between survival and surrender, its iron fittings rimed with frost, its surface unmoved by the urgency pounding against it. "Hello, delivery for Mr. Vale. Please open up. It is freezing." With a precise, almost polite electronic hum, the door unlocked and swung inward. Warm air spilled out in a tangible wave, wrapping around Lucy like invisible hands. The contrast was so sharp it made her gasp as heat chased cold from her skin and the storm was abruptly cut off behind her. Inside, the room revealed itself as a cathedral of time. Hundreds of clocks lined the walls, crowded shelves, and high alcoves, all ticking in relentless unison. The sound was overwhelming, yet ordered, a dense tapestry of tick and tock, each mechanism asserting its existence and merging into a single hypnotic pulse that seemed to govern the space itself.
You are late. The tracking data said 2 o'clock p.m. It is 2:07 p.m. and 32 seconds.
His voice came from above, measured and sharp, detached from the body that produced it. High on a workbench, cluttered with tools and glass domes, Caspian Vale did not bother to look down, his attention fixed on something far more important than the shivering courier below. "I am sorry." The snowplow was slow. "I have the package from the auction house, the Midnight Star pocket watch." Lucy stepped forward, flakes of snow sliding from her coat and melting into dark spots on the polished floor. The warmth had not yet reached her fingers. They burned and tingled, caught between numbness and pain, betraying her clumsiness before she even reached him.
Bring it here. Do not step on the white rug. Your boots are dirty.
The white rug lay like a forbidden boundary, pristine and untouched, its fibers bright against the darker floor. Lucy adjusted her path instinctively, suddenly hyper-aware of every movement she made. "Okay, here, oops." She tiptoed forward with her arms extended. The box was heavier than she expected, her stiff fingers rebelling at the task. For a heartbeat, gravity won, and the box slipped as time stretched thin and panic flared. Caspian moved with unnatural speed, fabric whispering sharply as he crossed the distance in a blur. His hand closed around the box, inches from the floor, halting the disaster so cleanly it felt unreal.
Careful. That box contains $3 million of history.
He straightened to his full height, imposing and precise, a magnifying loupe fixed over one eye and his waistcoat immaculate. His presence filled the room as completely as the ticking clocks.
Your hands are shaking.
"I am cold, and you are intimidating." Caspian took her hand without asking. His touch was dry, warm, and unnervingly steady, a stark contrast to her trembling fingers. The contact was clinical and impersonal, yet it sent a jolt through her.
You are hypothermic, and you have a high resting heart rate. Anxiety?
"Maybe. I am just a courier. Can you sign the pad so I can go?" He released her and turned his attention to the box, fingers already working at the clasps. The dismissal was absolute, as if her fear were merely another data point.
No. I need to inspect the goods. If the escapement is damaged from your clumsy handling, you will be paying for it.
The box opened with a soft click. For a moment, there was silence, an unnatural pause amid the ticking clocks. Then came a faint, wrong rattling that cut through the room like a crack in glass.
Broken. The balance spring is snapped. Did you drop this in the van?
"No, I swear. It must have been the turbulence on the plane. Please, do not report me. I will lose my job. It is the only job I have." Panic surged through her, hot and suffocating, her words tumbling out as tears blurred her vision. The room felt suddenly smaller and the clocks louder, their ticking counting down something she could not name.
You are distressed, tears are forming, inefficient.
He studied her through the loop with unsettling focus, then closed the watch, sealing its broken heart away.
The snowstorm has closed the pass. You cannot leave. And I need an assistant to help me fix this mess. My usual assistant is unavailable.
Me? I cannot fix watches. I break toasters. The words echoed absurdly among the ticking clocks, humorless and helpless all at once.
You have small fingers. That is all I need. Take off your coat. You are staying for dinner.
The workshop settled into a near-sacred stillness, the kind that made every sound feel deliberate and amplified. The air smelled faintly of oil and old brass. A single clock governed the room, its slow ticking carving time into careful, patient slices. Each second stretched then snapped cleanly into the next, echoing against wooden walls and metal drawers, as if the room itself were holding its breath, waiting for something precise to happen. On the workbench, tools seemed to converse in whispers. Metal met metal in soft, controlled clicks, followed by the delicate rain of tiny screws tumbling into a shallow tray. Each sound was sharp yet restrained, a reminder that this was a place where mistakes announced themselves loudly. The bench lamp cast a cone of light, isolating the watch from the rest of the world and turning it into a miniature universe of gears and tension.
Sit here. Put on these magnification glasses.
Everything looks huge. Your skin, I can see every pore. Through the magnification, the ordinary became overwhelming. Edges sharpened, textures swelled. The watch sprawled like a mechanical landscape, every groove and notch suddenly immense. Even Caspian's presence felt closer and more imposing, as if the lenses had collapsed the distance between them and stripped away the comfort of normal perspective.
Focus on the watch. I need you to hold the mainspring housing. Do not tremble. If you shake, the spring will fly out and slice your eye.
His instructions arrived calm and unadorned, each sentence landing with surgical clarity. The danger was stated without drama, which somehow made it worse. The mainspring housing gleamed under the light, compact and coiled with restrained violence, a reminder that precision here was not optional but necessary for survival. That's reassuring. The humor failed to disguise the fear tightening in her chest. Her shoulders tensed, and her fingers hovered just a fraction above the metal, already aware of their own potential to betray her with the smallest tremor.
I will stabilize you.
Caspian stepped behind her, his movement measured and soundless. His hands settled over hers with deliberate certainty, larger palms enclosing her smaller ones and guiding without forcing. His chest pressed against her back, solid and immovable, a living brace. The warmth of him contrasted with the cool metal beneath her fingers, creating a narrow corridor of sensation where nothing else existed.
Breathe in.
She drew in a careful breath, the air catching slightly as it filled her lungs, as though even breathing now had to obey his rhythm.
Hold.
Her breath suspended, time thinning to a fragile thread. The ticking clock seemed impossibly loud, each second daring her to fail.
Now, insert the pin.
In a moment, stretched to its limit, her guided fingers moved. The pin slid into place with a faint, immaculate click, a sound so small yet so final, it felt like a verdict rendered. Success settled over the bench, quiet and undeniable, like dust after a door closed.
Good, you have potential. Most people cannot control their micro-tremors. You, when you are held, you are still.
His breath brushed near her ear as he spoke, warm and unhurried. The words were not praise in the usual sense. They were observations, clinical yet intimate, cataloging her body's response as if she were another intricate mechanism worth examining. "It's because you're holding me. You feel like a statue." She spoke softly, aware of the contrast between her own unsteady pulse and his unyielding calm, as if she had leaned against something ancient and immovable.
I am an anchor. Time flows like a river around me, but I do not move.
As he released her, the absence of his hands was immediate and profound, like gravity, briefly lessened and then restored. The space between them returned, fragile and electric.
But your heart,
His fingers found her wrist, precise and gentle, pressing just enough to feel the truth beneath her skin.
it is beating like a hummingbird. Fast, erratic, it is fascinating.
Under his touch, her pulse betrayed her, fluttering and skipping, a chaotic rhythm impossible to hide. Why?
Because I live in a world of seconds and minutes. Perfect division. Your heart has no rhythm, it skips beats, it is chaotic. I want to study it.
Dinner unfolded in a hushed ritual high above the world, where the mountain air pressed gently against tall windows and the night gathered like a patient witness. The table was set with deliberate precision, every fork aligned, every plate centered, as if time itself demanded symmetry. Wine flowed slowly from the bottle, a dark ribbon catching firelight before pooling into crystal glasses. Somewhere nearby, a fireplace breathed, its low crackle layering warmth over the steady, omnipresent ticking of clocks. Not one or two, but hundreds of clocks measured existence in slightly different rhythms, turning the room into a cathedral of seconds. So, you just live up here alone, with 1,000 clocks? Lucy's voice cut gently through the ticking, half awe and half disbelief. She perched on the edge of the chair, her courier jacket folded awkwardly at her side, eyes darting from one timepiece to another. The clocks seemed to watch her back as their hands inched forward with quiet judgment. She had spent her life racing deadlines, but here, time did not chase. It waited.
People are noisy, clocks are honest. If a clock breaks, there is a reason. Friction, gravity, magnetism. If a person breaks, it is usually just emotion. I do not like emotion. It is messy.
Caspian spoke without haste, his voice as measured as the mechanisms surrounding them. He lifted his glass with practiced economy, the wine reflecting in his eyes like a dark mirror. Behind him, a long case clock marked each second with a deep, resonant pulse, as if agreeing with him. His world was one of causes and effects, systems that failed honestly, without excuses. But watches are emotional. People give them as gifts to remember moments. She leaned forward as she spoke, palms flattening against the table as conviction rose in her chest. To Lucy, watches were not diagrams or equations. They were anniversaries engraved in steel, fathers passing something down to sons, moments frozen because memory alone was never enough. The clocks around them seemed to recoil slightly from her warmth, their ticking unchanged but suddenly louder.
Sentimentality. A watch is a machine to measure entropy, to count down to death. You are young. You think time is infinite. I am 56. I know time is a limited resource. Why do you waste yours rushing around delivering packages?
He took a slow sip of wine, letting the silence stretch as though tasting the word and finding it lacking. When his gaze lifted to her, it sharpened, dissecting her youth with clinical accuracy. The fire flared softly, illuminating lines at the corners of his eyes, evidence of years spent bargaining with time rather than believing in it. His question was not cruel, but it was mercilessly direct. I have debts. My mom is sick. I need the money. The words tumbled out before she could soften them. Her fingers curled into her lap, nails biting into her skin as if to anchor herself. The ticking seemed to pause just enough that the space between seconds felt heavier. For Lucy, time was not philosophy. It was hospital bills, overdue notices, and the fear that running faster would still not be enough.
Debts, how much?
He did not sit immediately. Instead, Caspian remained still as the silence thickened around him. The clocks resumed their relentless chorus, filling the gap his words left behind. When he finally spoke again, the question was stripped bare of judgment, as neutral as a calibration mark. A lot, $50,000. The number landed heavily between them, an invisible weight pressing down on the table. Lucy swallowed, bracing herself for dismissal or advice she could not afford to follow. Caspian, however, simply stood. His chair slid back with a soft scrape, a rare imperfection in the room's controlled acoustics. He crossed the room with unhurried steps toward a steel safe embedded seamlessly into the wall. The dial turned beneath his fingers with precise rotations, accompanied by faint, mechanical murmurs. When the door opened, the smell of cold metal briefly displaced wine and smoke. He removed a thick stack of cash, its edges crisp, time condensed into paper.
Here.
He placed the money on the table between them, not tossed or flaunted, but set down with the same care he might give a rare movement. The bills fanned slightly, catching the firelight. To Lucy, it looked unreal, like a prop in someone else's life. What? No, I cannot take that. Her breath caught as she pushed back slightly, chair legs scraping. Her hands hovered uselessly above the table. Pride, fear, and relief collided all at once, leaving her trembling.
It is payment for your time. I am buying your time, Lucy. For the next month you belong to the workshop, I need to finish the Empress complication. It requires 2 sets of hands. Will you sell me your time?
He spoke calmly, as though proposing a transaction no more unusual than replacing a gear. Beneath his words lay urgency. The Empress complication existed half-finished in his workshop, a defiance of limits imposed by time itself. He was not buying labor. He was buying possibility. You want me to live here, with you? The idea settled over her slowly, a month removed from the streets, the van, and the constant countdown of fuel gauges and delivery windows. The clocks listened, impartial.
I have a guest wing, a library, and a chef. It is better than your courier van. Take it, save your mother, and let me save this watch.
He extended the cash toward her with a steady arm. In that moment, the offer became more than money. It was a recalibration of her life's rhythm. The fire sighed as embers collapsed inward, as if acknowledging the shift. Okay, yes. Her fingers closed around the bills, trembling despite herself. The paper was warm from the room, real and heavy. Somewhere deep inside, a clock she had ignored for years reset itself.
Good. Now give me your wrist.
He reached out and waited without touching. The request was practical, almost clinical, but the space between them felt charged. Why?
I need to measure you for a work strap, and I like feeling your pulse. It reminds me I am not dead yet.
When she offered her wrist, his fingers closed gently around it, his thumb settling over the subtle rhythm beneath her skin. The pulse beat steadily, alive and undeniable, syncing briefly with the ticking empire around them. For a fleeting second, time was not an enemy or a resource. It was simply shared. Morning arrived not as a gentle suggestion, but as a command. The house announced the hour with an overwhelming chorus. 50 grandfather clocks scattered through its vast body struck in perfect unison. The sound rolled through corridors and stairwells, climbed walls, pressed against doors, and vibrated inside Lucy's chest. Each resonant dong was identical, precise, and merciless, until time itself seemed to stand upright and demand obedience. Dust trembled in the air, glass panes shivered, and the mansion breathed as one synchronized machine awakening at exactly 8 o'clock. Does that happen every hour? Lucy lay half buried in sheets, her body heavy with sleep, her face twisted in a groan she could not quite suppress. The noise felt invasive, as if the clocks had reached into her dreams and torn them open. Her voice carried the rasp of someone pulled too quickly from warmth into order, from softness into structure. The room around her was already immaculate, untouched by the chaos of waking, everything except her.
Every morning at 8 a.m. it is the symphony of time. Get up. We have to wind the grandfather clocks in the East Hall.
Caspian stood near the door, already dressed as though the day had been waiting for him rather than the other way around. His suit was flawless, pressed into sharp lines that echoed the angles of the furniture and the rigid symmetry of the house. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to. Time itself seemed to listen when he spoke. To him, this ritual was not an interruption, but a continuation, a necessary movement in a sequence that must never be broken. They walked the East Hall together, their footsteps swallowed by the long corridor. Light spilled in through tall windows, pale and clean, illuminating rows of towering grandfather clocks like silent sentinels. As Caspian opened each glass door, the scent of old wood and oil emerged. The winding began, slow, heavy, and deliberate. Each crank echoed with effort, metal biting against metal, springs tightening under unseen strain, the sound of maintenance masquerading as ceremony.
You have to feel the tension in the spring. Too loose, it loses time. Too tight, it snaps. Try.
He placed the key into Lucy's hand, his fingers briefly brushing hers in accidental contact that lingered. She lifted her arm, suddenly aware of her own movements and how untrained they were compared to his. The clock loomed over her, its face unreadable, its inner workings hidden but impatient. This was not just a task. It was a lesson in balance, in restraint, in knowing exactly how far to go and no further. Lucy turned the key. Resistance answered her immediately, firm and unyielding, as if the clock were testing her resolve. The mechanism fought back, alive in its own quiet way, demanding respect. It is resisting.
Push through the resistance gently.
Caspian watched her closely, not intervening or correcting. His gaze followed the subtle tension in her wrist, the way her shoulders lifted, the concentration pulling her inward. Morning light poured through the window beside them, catching in her tangled hair and the loose fabric of her untucked shirt. Dust motes floated lazily around her, glowing like suspended stars, entirely unconcerned with precision.
You look beautiful in the morning light, Lucy. Dust motes dancing around you. You are the only thing in this house that is not precise. Your hair is messy. Your shirt is untucked.
The words landed softly but decisively. Lucy became suddenly aware of herself as an irregularity, a flaw or perhaps something rarer. In a house ruled by measured seconds and exact repetitions, she stood uneven and unaligned, breathing out of rhythm. His observation was not criticism, it was attention, focused and unsettling. "I will fix it." She shifted instinctively, fingers twitching toward her shirt, her posture straightening as though she might correct herself the way one corrected a mistake. Old habits stirred, the need to align, to conform, to reduce friction.
No, do not fix it.
He caught her hand before she could move away. The contact stopped her completely. His grip was firm but controlled, as though even this touch followed a rule only he understood. He stepped closer, the space between them narrowing, the clocks behind them continuing their steady, indifferent ticking.
I like the chaos. It highlights the order of the room. You are the disruption I did not know I needed.
For the first time that morning, something in the house felt off-tempo. Not broken, just altered. The clocks kept time, the springs held their tension. But between them, an unscheduled moment unfolded. Lucy stood there with her hand caught in his, breathing unevenly, while Caspian regarded her as one might regard a beautiful anomaly, something that should not exist, yet somehow made everything else clearer. Late night had settled over the workshop like a held breath. The room was lit only by a small constellation of lamps hovering over the workbench, each one casting a precise cone of light while leaving the corners in deliberate shadow. Outside, rain struck the tall glass panes with quiet persistence, not a storm, but a steady whisper, as if the night itself were leaning in to listen. The scent of oil, metal filings, and old wood hung in the air, layered with the faint electricity of machines resting between heartbeats. Time here did not move forward. It circled, measured in ticks, seconds, and patience. Caspian stood at the bench, spine slightly curved, one eye closed as the other pressed to the microscope. The instrument magnified not just the watch movement beneath it, but his entire focus, narrowing his world to a field measured in microns. His hands were steady, reverent, hovering as if afraid to disturb the fragile order of the mechanism. Each breath he took was slow and economical, calibrated like the devices he built. The rain outside faded into irrelevance. Only the silent argument between perfection and imperfection remained.
I cannot see the flaw. The diamond pivot is microscopic. Lucy, come here. Your eyes are younger. Look through the lens.
Lucy stepped closer, drawn into the small orbit of light around the bench. The invitation carried a strange intimacy, not romantic yet, but precise, like being trusted with a secret. She leaned forward, the cool edge of the table brushing her hip, her curiosity sharpening as she adjusted to the scale of Caspian's world. The microscope loomed like a portal, promising revelation if she only aligned herself correctly. Where? Caspian moved behind her, close enough that the heat from his body altered the air. He placed his hands gently near her temples, not quite touching at first, then guiding her head with careful pressure. The gesture was professional, almost clinical, yet unmistakably intimate. Their reflections overlapped faintly in the glass of the microscope, two faces briefly sharing the same narrow field of view.
There, do you see the scratch?
Lucy adjusted her angle, blinking as the magnified universe snapped into clarity. What had been invisible to the naked eye now stretched out like a scarred horizon, a flaw exaggerated into drama. Her breath caught, not from fear, but from awe at how something so small could carry such consequence. Yes, it looks like a canyon. Caspian allowed himself the smallest nod, a confirmation more than approval. To him, scale was a matter of respect. He had spent his life honoring the tiny forces that governed larger outcomes, and this flaw, this canyon, was an insult to harmony.
It is 1 micron wide, but it ruins the movement. Stay there. Do not move. I need to polish it while you watch the alignment.
He reached around her for his tools, his arms crossing the invisible boundary of personal space. The motion drew him so close that Lucy could feel the faint rise and fall of his chest against her back. Metal touched metal softly as instruments were selected with care, the choreography practiced yet charged. It was as though the watch, the work, and Lucy herself had merged into a single, delicate operation. Caspian, you are very close. For a fraction of a second, his hands paused. Then they resumed, precise as ever, as if acknowledging proximity without retreating from necessity.
I have to be. The focal length is short. You smell like vanilla and ozone. It is intoxicating.
His breathing settled into a rhythm she could feel more than hear, steady and controlled, each exhale brushing her shoulder. The workshop seemed to contract around them, every ticking clock and distant drip of rain synchronizing with that cadence. Lucy's awareness sharpened, every nerve attentive, caught between stillness and sensation. You said you hate distractions. Caspian's hands slowed, then stilled completely. The tools rested on the bench, the watch left suspended in its incomplete state, as if even the mechanism sensed the shift.
I do, but you are a distraction I want to study.
He turned her chair with deliberate care, rotating her away from the microscope and into the light. The motion was unhurried, granting the moment weight. He lifted the loop, that small circle of glass through which he judged the world, and brought it between them like a promise and a barrier.
Hold still. I want to look at you through the loop.
Lucy swallowed, suddenly aware of her own breath, her own imperfections magnified by anticipation rather than glass. My face? It is full of flaws. Caspian examined her with the same devotion he reserved for his finest creations. Through the magnifier, her features became terrain, history written in skin and color. He catalogued without judgment, only wonder.
Freckles like constellations, a small scar on your lip. Your iris has gold flecks. It is a landscape.
He lowered the loupe and set it aside, the gesture final, as though a conclusion had been reached after careful measurement.
Perfect. No machine could make this.
Lucy's breath came shallow now, the space between them charged with words unspoken. The rain pressed harder against the glass, as if urging her on. "Kiss me." Caspian stepped back, the distance abrupt, almost painful. Control reasserted itself in his posture, in the careful placement of his hands at his sides.
No, if I kiss you, I will lose count of the seconds. And I never lose count. Go to bed, Lucy.
Geneva revealed itself not through a single image, but through layers of opulence stacked upon sound. The auction house breathed with subdued extravagance, the low hum of multilingual chatter, the discreet rustle of tailored fabrics, and the crystalline clink of champagne flutes lifted and set down with ritual precision. Each gavel strike cracked through the air like a commandment, sharp and final, demanding obedience from fortunes old and new. The walls, polished to a mirror sheen, reflected ambition itself, multiplying greed, desire, and rivalry into an endless, glittering hall. When Caspian entered, the room subtly recalibrated around him. He moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to being watched, Lucy's arm resting lightly in his, as though she were both anchor and announcement. Her silver dress caught the light in slow, liquid flashes, echoing the precision of the horological masterpieces surrounding them. Heads turned, not abruptly, but inevitably, as if drawn by gravity. This was not merely an arrival, it was a declaration that something rare had stepped into the room, something that could not be ignored.
Lot 45. The Marie Antoinette Breguet. Bidding starts at 10 million.
The auctioneer's voice carried authority sharpened by years of commanding rooms like this. At the mention of the Marie Antoinette Breguet, a reverent stillness rippled outward. This was not just a watch, it was mythology rendered in gold and gears, a relic soaked in obsession and history. Paddles hovered, fingers tensed, eyes narrowed. 10 million was not an opening. It was a challenge, thrown casually into the air for titans to answer.
Stand straight. You are wearing the prototype of my new collection. Every collector in the room is looking at your wrist.
Caspian leaned closer, his breath warm against Lucy's ear, his words delivered with controlled precision. His gaze swept the room, cataloging interest the way others might catalog art. To him, every glance was a calculation, every lingering stare a potential threat. Lucy was not just beside him. She was central to his strategy, the living embodiment of innovation and allure, and he was acutely aware of how dangerously effective that combination could be. "They are looking at my legs, Caspian." Lucy's response carried a note of dry amusement, but beneath it lay an awareness just as sharp as his. She could feel the attention, like a physical pressure, eyes tracing lines they had no right to follow. The dress, the room, and the power dynamics all converged on her body, turning her into both participant and spectacle. She did not shrink from it, but neither did she pretend it was harmless.
I noticed, especially that man, Count Rossi. He collects watches and women.
The darkness in Caspian's tone was not theatrical. It was instinctive. His eyes fixed on Count Rossi with the focus of a predator recognizing another of his kind. Rossi's reputation preceded him, whispered in corridors of wealth and scandal alike. To Caspian, this was no casual observation. It was a territorial assessment, an unspoken warning already forming long before words would be exchanged. Count Rossi approached with the confidence of a man who had never been denied entry, his presence slicing through the crowd with oily charm. He smiled as he closed the distance, already extending his hand as though Lucy were an object placed conveniently within reach. The surrounding guests leaned in subtly, sensing friction the way one senses an approaching storm before the first thunderclap.
Caspian. And who is this stunning timepiece? May I inspect the watch? Exquisite. The watch is nice too.
Rossi's fingers closed around Lucy's hand with practiced entitlement, lifting it as though she were indeed a mechanism to be appraised. His lips brushed her skin and lingered there a moment too long, the gesture deliberately intimate. It was a performance meant to provoke, to assert dominance under the guise of admiration. The insult lay not only in the touch, but in the assumption that such touch was his to take.
Rossi, let go of her hand, or I will break your fingers, and you will never wind a watch again.
Caspian's voice dropped to a temperature that froze the air between them. There was no volume, no theatrics, only certainty. The threat was precise, personal, and devastatingly plausible. In that instant, the room seemed to contract, every observer instinctively aware they were witnessing something raw and unfiltered. This was not rivalry for an object, but a line drawn around a person.
Always so serious, Caspian. It is just business.
Rossi laughed, but the sound fractured at the edges, betraying nerves he could not fully conceal. He attempted retreat through humor, reframing the moment as trivial and transactional. Yet his eyes flicked briefly to his own hand, already imagining the cost of miscalculation. Business was a language he understood, but so was danger.
She is not business. She is private collection. Not for sale, not for display. Mine.
Caspian pulled Lucy closer, his arm firm around her waist, a physical punctuation to his words. The possessiveness was unmistakable, but so was the intent behind it. Protection sharpened by jealousy. The room absorbed the declaration in silence. In that embrace, Lucy was shielded from the crowd's gaze, removed from commerce, desire, and valuation, claimed openly and without apology. "You called me your collection." Lucy tilted her head slightly toward him, her whisper threading through the charged air between them. The words were soft, but they carried weight. Beneath the humor lay a question about agency, about meaning, about where admiration ended and ownership began. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with the tension of standing at the center of someone else's obsession.
I lied. You are not a collection. You are the only one. Let us leave. I am buying the watch over the phone. I cannot stand them looking at you.
Caspian did not hesitate after that. His decision was immediate and final. The watch, the room, and the millions in play all diminished in importance compared to the raw certainty in his chest. As he guided Lucy away, the auction house seemed suddenly smaller, its grandeur hollow. Eyes followed them, but no one dared intervene. Some acquisitions, it was clear, were never meant to be bid on. The chalet stood swallowed by the blizzard, a wooden island besieged by white fury. Snow hurled itself against the walls and windows, screaming like an unreasoning animal, until the structure groaned in protest. Inside, warmth had been a fragile promise, dependent on wires and bulbs and the quiet hum of electricity. That promise shattered in an instant. The lights vanished violently, plunging every corner into a darkness so thick it felt textured, as if it could be touched. With the power gone, the familiar rhythm of the house changed. The electronic clocks went silent, their digital faces erased. The sudden absence of their ticking was louder than noise, a void that pressed against the ears. Only the mechanical clocks survived, their gears stubbornly turning, releasing slow, uneven ticks that echoed like heartbeats in a cavern, reminding the house that some things endured without permission. "Caspian, where are you? It is pitch black." Lucy stood frozen, her hands hovering uselessly in the air, afraid to move. The darkness stripped the room of depth and distance, collapsing space into uncertainty. Every sound felt amplified. Her pulse thudded in her throat, each beat a reminder that she was suddenly small inside a vast, unlit world.
Stay where you are. The stairs are dangerous.
Caspian's voice emerged from the darkness, calm but distant. He moved carefully, guided by memory rather than sight, counting steps in his mind. The storm raged on outside, but inside his focus narrowed to a single objective: to find her before fear took root too deeply. His hand closed around her arm, firm and deliberate. The contact was sudden and grounding, a solid proof that she was not alone. His fingers were cool from the air but steady, anchoring her in place. In that instant, the darkness receded just enough to make room for him. "I hate the dark." The admission slipped out of her, unguarded and raw. The dark was not merely a lack of light, but a flood of imagined dangers, a return to childhood fears that reason could not dissolve. Her shoulders tightened, as though bracing against something unseen creeping closer.
The dark is just the absence of light. It is peaceful.
As he spoke, Caspian guided her across the room. Each step was careful and intentional. He drew her toward the fireplace, a remembered center of warmth and safety. His words were not meant to dismiss her fear, but to reframe it, to strip the darkness of its menace, and leave behind a quiet, waiting stillness.
I will make a fire.
He knelt before the fireplace, hands moving with practiced ease. Striking the match felt ceremonial, the brief flare of light shocking in its brightness. Flames caught slowly, growing stronger with each breath. Shadows retreated, reshaping themselves along the walls, as the fire claimed its territory, painting the room in amber and gold. Without the clocks ticking, it feels like time stopped. She listened intently, realizing how much of her sense of order had depended on that constant ticking. Without it, moments stretched strangely, elastic and undefined. The past and future loosened their grip, leaving her suspended in a present that felt both frightening and intimate.
Time never stops, but we can suspend it.
The fire reflected in his eyes as he spoke, revealing something unguarded beneath his usual precision. He lowered himself onto the rug beside her. In the firelight, lines of age and solitude softened, and for a rare moment he allowed himself to sit without measuring minutes or counting seconds.
You are shivering.
It is the cold. Her teeth barely chattered, but her body betrayed her, trembling in small, involuntary waves. The cold crept up from the floor, threading through her clothes and settling into her bones. It was not just temperature that made her shake, but the aftershock of fear finally releasing its hold.
Come here. Body heat is efficient thermodynamics.
He opened his arms with a hesitation that spoke volumes, as if unsure he was allowed to ask for closeness. The gesture was practical in his words, but gentle in execution, an invitation wrapped in logic to disguise the vulnerability beneath. "You are warm." She crawled into his lap, fitting herself against him instinctively. His warmth surrounded her, solid and reassuring. The steady rise and fall of his chest became a rhythm she could trust, sinking her breathing to his until the cold loosened its grip.
You fit like a cog in a wheel. Lucy, I have been alone for 20 years. My wife left me because I love my clocks more than her. She said I was a machine.
The confession emerged quietly, carried on the crackle of the fire. Each word seemed heavy and long-stored. His arms tightened around her, not possessive, but afraid of losing this moment. The man who understood mechanisms better than emotions laid bare the cost of a life measured too precisely. "You are not a machine. Machines do not have a heartbeat like this. It is fast." She rested her ear against his chest, listening. The heartbeat was undeniable, quick and uneven. It contradicted every accusation he had accepted as truth. In that sound, she found proof not only of his humanity, but of his fear, his longing, and his fragile hope.
Because you are touching me. You broke my mechanism, Lucy. I cannot keep time when you are near. I only want the moment to last forever.
His voice trembled despite himself. The man who had mastered time confessed defeat, undone by proximity and warmth. The clocks, the years, and the solitude faded beneath the weight of her presence. For once, he did not want control. He wanted stillness. Then let it. The fire popped softly as he leaned down, closing the distance between them. The kiss began tentative, a question rather than a claim, before deepening into certainty. Flames danced higher, casting their entwined shadows against the walls, while outside the storm raged on, powerless to touch the fragile eternity they had chosen. Morning arrived not with haste, but with a pale, deliberate patience. Sunlight slipped through tall windows and stretched across the workshop floor, catching on polished brass, half-finished gears, and the faint dust of time itself. The room smelled of oil and metal, of precision and long hours spent bending order out of chaos. Lucy moved carefully through this sacred space, cloth in hand, mindful of every surface she touched. Yet, even in her caution, there was tension, an unspoken awareness that this was not truly her world, but one she was temporarily allowed to orbit. The tray tipped before she realized it was happening. A shallow breath, a fraction of a second too late. Tiny rubies spilled from the tray and struck the floor, scattering in all directions, bouncing and rolling into shadows and cracks. Each one flashed briefly in the sunlight like a dying star before vanishing. The sound was soft, almost innocent, but to Lucy, it rang louder than a shout. No, 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 no. These are the bearings for the Emperor's watch. Her voice cracked as panic flooded her chest. The Emperor's watch was not merely an object. It was legend, precision incarnate, a mechanism spoken of in whispers. Lucy froze, breath shallow, afraid that even the smallest movement might cause irreparable harm. Her heart pounded as guilt and fear tangled together, each beat reminding her of how badly she believed she did not belong here. Footsteps entered the room, measured and calm, a stark contrast to the chaos at Lucy's feet. Caspian appeared in the doorway, his presence immediately shifting the air. He took in the scene in a single glance, the overturned tray, the scattered rubies, and Lucy standing rigid with horror written across her face.
Don't move. If you step, you will crush them.
Lucy obeyed instantly, her muscles locking as if she had been carved from stone. Shame rose quickly, hot and familiar. Words tumbled out of her before she could stop them, each one another attempt to shrink herself and accept blame before it could be fully given. I'm so clumsy, I ruined it. You should fire me. I'm just a courier. I don't belong here. Caspian did not answer right away. Instead, he lowered himself to the floor with controlled grace, as though kneeling before a ritual rather than a mistake. From his pocket, he produced a pair of fine tweezers, their tips glinting in the light. His focus narrowed, the rest of the world receding as he aligned himself with the task at hand.
Stop talking. Help me find them. We have 12 rubies.
The workshop fell into a tense stillness, broken only by the soft scrape of fingertips against stone. Lucy slowly lowered herself to the floor opposite him. They began to crawl, careful and deliberate, faces close to the ground, breaths shallow. The intimacy of the moment was unintentional, yet undeniable. Two lives reduced to inches, searching for perfection among dust and shadow. Here's one. Here's two. Caspian, I think I should go. My mom is better. The month is up. I'm just distracting you. Her words hung between them, heavier than the rubies themselves. Caspian's hand paused mid-search. For the first time, he looked at her instead of the floor. In his stillness was not anger, but something more unsettling. Consideration.
Is that what you think? That you are a distraction?
Lucy swallowed. Old beliefs rose easily to her lips, beliefs forged long before this room, this man, and this moment. She answered with the honesty of someone who had never been allowed to think otherwise. Aren't I? You said you need order. I am chaos. Caspian's gaze softened, though his voice remained steady. He returned to the search, but his words were no longer about rubies or watches. They were about something deeper, something alive.
Chaos is the source of life. Without chaos, the universe is static, dead. I don't want a dead house anymore.
His tweezers closed around the final ruby, lifting it gently into the light. It gleamed, whole and unharmed. He let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. The count was complete, but the moment was not.
12, we found them all, just like I found you.
The sound of the suitcase zipper cut through the room with brutal finality, metal teeth grinding together as if sealing more than fabric inside. Each pull echoed off the walls, magnified by the late-night stillness of the house. Lucy's quiet sobs rose and fell in uneven waves, the kind that came from holding too much in for too long. The air smelled faintly of dust and machine oil, a reminder that the house had always been more workshop than home, built for precision rather than comfort. I have to go, Caspian. Her voice trembled, but the words were steady, rehearsed long before they reached her lips. She kept her eyes on the suitcase and the scuffed floorboards beneath it, anywhere but him. Leaving meant survival, she told herself, even as her chest ached with the effort of breathing. Every heartbeat felt like a betrayal of what she was about to abandon. You are a genius. You have a legacy. The compliment sounded small in the vastness of the room, inadequate compared to the years of brilliance she had witnessed. She had watched him bend time into gears and springs, watched ideas become mechanisms beneath his hands. Standing there now, she felt painfully ordinary, a flawed human presence amid immaculate creations. I am just a girl who owes you money. The words tasted bitter to her, heavy with shame. Debt was more than numbers. It was a weight pressing down on her sense of worth. She imagined herself as an imbalance in his carefully calibrated world, an error he had graciously absorbed but never truly needed. I do not want to be another project you fixed. As she said it, her hands clenched at her sides, nails biting into her palms. She feared the truth hidden beneath her accusation. That part of her wanted to be saved and wanted to stay. Admitting that desire felt more dangerous than leaving because it would mean surrendering the last piece of control she still possessed.
You are not a project.
Caspian stood in the doorway, framed by the soft glow of the hallway lights. He had not moved since she picked up the suitcase, as if motion itself might shatter something fragile between them. His voice carried a quiet intensity, sharpened by desperation he did not know how to conceal.
You are the mainspring, the heart of the watch.
He spoke in metaphors because they were safer than plain emotion, because machines had always been easier for him to understand than people. In his mind, he could see it clearly, a perfect mechanism rendered useless by the absence of a single essential component. Without her, nothing he built would ever truly function again.
Without the mainspring, the gears do not turn.
His hands tightened at his sides, knuckles whitening. The house seemed to hold its breath, the countless clocks lining the walls ticking in uneasy unison, as if they too understood the stakes of the moment.
If you leave, I stop.
The pause before the final words was unbearable. In that silence lived his fear of stillness, of becoming a man surrounded by motionless creations. He did not threaten her. He offered the truth as he understood it, stripped of pride and laid bare. You will find someone else, someone elegant. She forced a faint, humorless smile, picturing a woman who belonged in the house more than she ever could. Someone polished and composed, untouched by debts and doubts. The image was meant to comfort him, but it only deepened the ache behind her ribs.
I do not want elegant, I want you.
The admission escaped him before he could temper it, raw and unguarded. For once, he abandoned precision, choosing honesty over elegance and vulnerability over control.
I want your messy hair and your cold hands and your loud laugh.
Each detail landed like a memory brought painfully to life. Mornings when her hair refused to behave, evenings when she complained about the chill, moments when her laughter filled the house and drowned out the ticking. He loved her not in spite of these things, but because of them.
Please.
The word was barely audible, a fracture in his carefully constructed composure. It carried years of solitude and nights spent talking to machines because people were too unpredictable to trust.
Do not make me beg. I do not know how.
His confession was almost childlike, an acknowledgement of a skill he had never learned. He could build wonders from brass and steel, but asking someone to stay left him utterly unprepared. Goodbye, Caspian. She brushed past him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body. Gone, a second later, like a fading signal. She did not look back. The decision, once spoken, demanded completion. The door closed with a soft but definitive click, followed by the distant sound of a car engine turning over. Tires crunched against gravel and faded into the night. Caspian remained where he was, alone in the silent house. The clocks resumed their relentless ticking, no longer comforting, but cruel, each measured second a reminder of what had just been lost. 1 month had slipped by almost unnoticed, not with the sharp precision of a clock hand, but with the soft, unfocused drift of days that no longer demanded to be measured. The flower shop was alive with quiet industry as pale morning light filtered through the front window and illuminated rows of fresh blooms. Their colors were muted by dust motes hanging in the air, and petals brushed against one another whenever Lucy moved, releasing layered fragrances of rose, lily, earth, and water that blended into something tender and grounding. Outside, the city moved on, but inside the shop, time seemed padded and slowed, as if wrapped gently in cloth. A small radio near the register murmured with static and distant voices, competing softly with the rustle of leaves and the snip of Lucy's scissors. When the news report cut through, clearer and firmer, it felt like a stone dropped into still water. The announcer spoke of Caspian Vale's long-awaited unveiling and emphasized the word final with reverence. The word lingered after the sentence ended, heavy and unresolved, vibrating faintly through the shop like an aftershock. Final? He's retiring? The question escaped Lucy before she realized she was speaking aloud. Her hands paused mid-motion, with stems half-trimmed, as her thoughts raced ahead of the words. Final meant endings and doors closed with deliberate care. She tried to imagine Caspian stepping away from ticking mechanisms and measured perfection, but the image refused to settle. The radio droned on, unheard now, as her pulse quickened with quiet dread and curiosity. The bell above the shop door rang out suddenly, bright and sharp, slicing through her haze of thought. Cool air swept in from outside with muted street sounds and the faint smell of rain-soaked stone. Lucy looked up as the door closed behind a familiar silhouette, and the bell's echo faded into a charged silence. Caspian stood just inside the doorway, with shoulders slightly hunched, as though unseen hours pressed down on him. His hair was uncombed and his face shadowed by stubble, with exhaustion wringing his eyes. The meticulous elegance that once defined him seemed worn thin, replaced by something rawer and more human. He looked as though he had walked straight out of a sleepless night into this moment without pause.
Hello, Lucy.
His voice was softer than she remembered and stripped of its usual precision. Lucy felt a tug in her chest as she took him in, noticing how his gaze lingered on her, uncertain yet intent, as if this encounter mattered more than any unveiling or applause waiting elsewhere. "Caspian, you look terrible." The words came with concern rather than judgment. She set her tools aside and stepped closer, the space between them closing with an intimacy neither of them acknowledged aloud.
I haven't slept or wound the clocks. The house is silent. I made something for you.
As he spoke, Caspian's eyes drifted into the distance, as if he could still hear the echo of silence filling his home. The absence of ticking hung over him like a confession. He reached into his coat and produced a small velvet box, dark and soft, and placed it on the counter with careful reverence, as though setting down a fragile truth.
Open it.
Lucy hesitated only a fraction of a second before lifting the lid. Inside lay a silver watch, delicate in size and design, its surface catching the light in a subtle shimmer. It did not announce its value or complexity, but invited closer attention and promised something personal beneath its quiet beauty. "It's beautiful." Her voice wavered with awe. She traced the edge of the watch with her eyes, sensing that this was not merely an object, but a culmination of thought, effort, and feeling compressed into metal and motion.
Listen to it.
Lucy lifted the watch and brought it close to her ear. The world seemed to fall away as she focused on the sound within. It was not the clean, even ticking she expected, but something warmer and uneven. The rhythm pulsed softly, echoing through her bones and unmistakably intimate. "It sounds like a heartbeat."
It is a heartbeat. I calibrated the escapement to match your pulse, the one I measured that first night. It doesn't keep perfect time and skips a beat every minute, just like my heart does when I see you. It is the most inaccurate watch I have ever made, and it is my greatest work.
Each sentence landed with quiet intensity. Caspian spoke not as a master addressing an audience, but as a man laying himself bare. The confession threaded memory and mechanics together, valuing connection over precision and humanity over control. "You made a broken watch for me?" Tears spilled freely and blurred Lucy's vision. Her words trembled between disbelief and gratitude as the enormity of the gesture overwhelmed her defenses.
I made a human watch because I don't want to be the timekeeper anymore. I want to be the man who loves you. Will you come home? The clocks have stopped and only you can wind them.
The plea was simple and stripped of grandeur. Caspian stood not as a legend of time, but as someone reaching out in fear and hope. The stopped clocks were no longer machines, but metaphors waiting for life to return. Yes, I'll come home." The words settled between them like a promise finally kept. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, but inside the flower shop, time resumed not in seconds or minutes, but in shared breath and heartbeats allowed to be imperfect together. Back at the chalet, the air seemed to hold its breath, as if the building itself understood the importance of the moment. Wooden walls, warmed by years of quiet living, creaked softly in response to the cold outside. One by one, metal keys were turned with deliberate care, the motion slow and almost ceremonial. Each crank carried a sense of intention, a human challenge to the invisible force that ruled them all: time. As the keys completed their turns, the clocks responded. Not all at once, but gradually, as if waking from a shared sleep. A tick here, a tock there, until the chalet was filled with overlapping rhythms. The sound swelled into something almost orchestral, a mechanical symphony where every clock claimed its own fragile authority over seconds and minutes, reminding the room that time had resumed its endless march. Caspian stood close to Lucy, his arm settling around her waist with a tenderness that betrayed both confidence and restraint. His hand rested there, not as a claim, but as an anchor, feeling the subtle rise and fall of her body. In that simple contact, he seemed to listen not only to her breathing, but to everything it represented: warmth, presence, and the fragile now.
Music to my ears.
"Which one? The clocks?" Lucy tilted her head slightly, the faintest smile playing on her lips. The ticking clocks framed her question, surrounding it with irony. She was aware of the noise, of course, but also aware of how close he was, how his attention felt entirely focused on her, despite the mechanical chorus echoing through the chalet.
No, your breath.
The words lingered between them, soft yet heavy with meaning. Caspian leaned in, closing the small distance that still separated them. His lips met hers in a kiss that was neither rushed nor hesitant, a careful exchange that acknowledged both desire and the quiet fear beneath it. Time, for a brief instant, seemed to bend around that touch.
I cannot promise you forever, Lucy. I am older than you. My time will run out before yours.
As he spoke, the truth of his words settled heavily in the room. It was not regret that shaped his voice, but honesty. The ticking clocks became a cruel counterpoint, each second underscoring the reality he could not escape. His age was not just a number. It was a shadow stretching forward, measuring what he could give and what he could not. Then we don't waste a second, Lucy answered without hesitation. There was resolve in her tone, a refusal to let fear dictate the present. She looked at him as if the future were irrelevant, as if meaning existed only in what they chose to do now. In her certainty, the relentless ticking seemed to lose some of its power.
Agreed.
The decision, once spoken, felt final. Caspian bent slightly and lifted Lucy into his arms. The movement was smooth, practiced, yet charged with emotion. Her weight against him was reassuring, real, grounding him in the moment. The clocks continued their chorus, but now they sounded distant, almost irrelevant.
Let's go upstairs. I want to show you that time is relative. And tonight I will make time stop completely.
He carried her toward the stairs, each step a quiet declaration against the limits he had just acknowledged. The promise in his words was not literal, but emotional, a vow to fill the night so completely that minutes and years would lose their meaning. Behind them, the chalet remained alive with ticking clocks, unaware that, for these two, time was about to be forgotten. The scene slowly dissolved into a deeper, steadier sound. The ticking faded, replaced by the strong, rhythmic heartbeat of a watch. It pulsed with unwavering consistency, a reminder that time never truly stops. Yet, in its measured beats, there was also comfort, as if eternity itself could be held within a single, perfect moment.